My name is Olivia Medline. I'm 34 years old, living in an elegant white-roofed house in a quiet suburban neighborhood of Austin, Texas. From the outside, anyone would probably think I'm living a dream life. A house with a rose garden blooming year-round, a handsome husband, and a full-time homemaker role I've proudly devoted myself to. I've been tending to every corner of this home for more than 10 years. My husband, Thomas Parker, is 38 years old and works as a sales director for a large pharmaceutical company. He's tall, with neatly groomed brown hair and a confident smile that easily charms anyone meeting him for the first time. In the early days of our marriage, I thought I was truly lucky. Thomas was gallant, ambitious, and always knew how to make people like him. Whenever friends visited, they would tease me saying, "Caroline really landed a treasure. Hold on to him tight." Back then, I'd just smile, believing our love would always be strong enough to weather any storm. We fell in love and married after nearly 2 years of dating. At first, I was full of hope for a perfect home, one where the laughter of children would fill the mornings. But as the years passed, anxious waits in clinic rooms, cold test results, and failed treatments gradually drained that hope. I spent 4 years undergoing fertility treatments, trying everything from Eastern to Western medicine, only to finally let go when the last doctor sighed and said, "It's all in the hands of fate." In the beginning, Thomas encouraged me a lot. He held my hand and said, "As long as I have you, I feel complete." But I still vividly remember the moments he stood silently watching the neighbor's child playing in the yard. His eyes filled with something he never spoke aloud. And those eyes felt like quiet scratches on my heart. Everything changed completely after my parents passed away. My father died from a stroke, and just 3 months later, my mother also left us after a long illness. That loss left me hollow, but it also pushed me into the role of sole heir to the legacy my parents had built with so much effort. A small but solid real estate company, along with several apartments and savings. I never expected that money would be enough for Thomas and me to elevate our lifestyle. We moved into our current home, bought a new SUV, and vacationed at least twice a year at luxury resorts in Florida or California. I started to notice Thomas's gaze changing, not so much at me, but at everything around me. That was when I first felt a vague unease I couldn't name. People around us still saw us as the perfect couple. The glamorous check-in photos, the expensive wine parties, the envious well wishes whenever I posted something on social media. All of it was like a curtain covering the nights I lay awake, listening to my own lonely sighs. Sometimes, I wondered, could material abundance be quietly eroding something that once felt so solid between us? But then I'd reassure myself that maybe I was just being overly sensitive. Thomas still appeared to be the ideal man in our friends' eyes, still said sweet things to me in front of others. But I couldn't help noticing the growing distance in his gestures. The times he smiled, but his eyes no longer held that warm light they once did. And inside this fully equipped house, I sometimes felt like a stranger in my own life. I never expected that the fortune I thought was a gift from fate would be what pulled me into an undercurrent I never saw coming. In the months after we moved into our new house, I began to see more changes in Thomas. He no longer seemed eager to come home. The cozy dinners that used to be our routine were replaced by curt text messages. "I'm busy with work. Don't wait for me for dinner." At first, I tried to convince myself it was just a tough phase at work. But over time, his explanations became so repetitive they felt hollow. And I couldn't stop my heart from tightening with a growing sense of unease. These days, Thomas came home late almost every night. Many evenings, it wasn't until the clock struck 10 p.m. that he'd walk in the door looking tired. But strangely, his eyes sparkled with an odd excitement. On some nights, when I gently asked, "Is everything okay at work?" Thomas would give a faint smile and say, "Just a lot of new projects. Don't worry." But the indifference in his tone only made me more anxious. What troubled me most was his phone. Thomas no longer left his phone on the table like before. He always kept it on him. And when a call came in, he would quickly step out onto the balcony or down to the garage, avoiding my gaze. Sometimes, I heard him talking in such a low voice. It was almost a whisper. Though he used to share everything with me. Work calls and even casual chats with colleagues. Once, when I unexpectedly stepped out onto the balcony, he hurriedly ended the call and forced a look of calm. That was a client. Big contract tomorrow. But I had heard clearly, a woman's voice on the other end, soft laughing. It didn't sound like any client he'd ever mentioned. Thomas also stopped showing me his monthly credit card statements like he used to. When I asked, "Can you give them to me so I can manage our spending?" he quickly replied, "I'll handle it myself. Don't want to mix it up with the company card. Too much hassle." His face showed a flicker of irritation that stunned me. It was the first time in our marriage he seemed annoyed when I asked about finances. Something we had always agreed would be completely transparent. I began to feel lost in my own home. The long evenings I sat alone in the living room, watching car lights on the street, and wondering, is Thomas still the man who vowed to stand by me for life? I kept telling myself to trust him, to give him time. But night after night, the doubt inside me grew like a dark cloud I couldn't push away. One weekend evening, Thomas unexpectedly took me to a company party, an event he no longer mentioned as often as he used to. The atmosphere sparkled with golden lights and soft music. Thomas laughed and chatted with everyone as if nothing was wrong. I tried to blend in, telling myself to let go of my suspicions. But then, as I stood alone near the wine bar, I happened to overhear a conversation between Thomas and a colleague. Thomas leaned toward the person, his voice dropping. "The project in San Antonio is almost wrapped up. After that, I'll have more freedom." The colleague chuckled softly. "You're really discreet about it. Did you leave any trace?" Thomas took a sip of wine, his eyes flashing with something. I couldn't tell if it was worry or excitement. "Don't worry. Everything is under control." San Antonio? I had never heard Thomas mention any project there. That city is over 100 miles from Austin, not a place he usually works. My heart pounded, trying to swallow the wave of anxiety rising inside me. I couldn't bring myself to move. That night on the way home, Thomas held my hand, still the gentle husband everyone admired. But I no longer felt any warmth in that hand. And I knew the doubt in my heart could no longer be pushed aside. I thought I was calm enough to face the changes in Thomas. But then a phone call from my best friend, Allison, rekindled the fire of suspicion I had tried so hard to extinguish these past days. Allison had been my friend since college, and now worked at a media company in Houston. That day, just as I set my teacup down on the table, the phone rang. Her voice came through, a bit hesitant but full of concern. "Caroline, I need to tell you something. Last week, I was on a business trip in San Antonio. I'm not entirely sure, but I saw Thomas." I froze, gripping the phone tightly. "What did you say?" I kept telling myself maybe I was mistaken, but it was definitely Thomas. He was sitting in a small cafe near the bus station, with a blonde woman, younger than you. They seemed pretty close. I don't want to jump to conclusions, but it didn't feel right at all. I felt my throat tighten, my heartbeat pounding like it would burst from my chest. I forced myself to stay calm and thanked Allison for telling me. That night, I sat by the window, staring out at the peaceful night sky while my heart churned. So many questions rushed in at once. Who was that woman? Why was Thomas hiding this from me? And why did everything seem to match the signs I'd seen all this time? 3 days later, Thomas unexpectedly came home earlier than usual. His face lit up, unusually bright, as he walked into the house. Before I could say anything, he spoke up. "I think we need some time for just us. Let's go to New Orleans this weekend. I already booked a room at a riverside hotel. We can rekindle things. What do you say?" I was surprised. Thomas had been using work as an excuse to avoid private moments like this for over a year now. This sudden offer made me feel both happy and uneasy. I tried to mask my unease with a calm expression. "Did you really mean that?" Thomas hugged me, pressing his cheek to my hair, his voice warm. But strangely, I felt a chill. "I love you," That's all you need to remember, Caroline. His gaze was deep as he looked at me, but somehow, I saw in it something that felt like. The whole night before the trip, I lay awake. When Thomas finally fell asleep, I sat silently in the dim light. On impulse, I opened his briefcase, the one he always kept close. I hadn't meant to invade my husband's privacy, but something inside pushed me to find the truth. Inside, besides his laptop and notebook, I found a thick file folder with a pale blue cover. My hand trembled as I pulled it out. Austin Mental Wellness Center. Medical file. The printed words on the cover stunned me. My heart raced wildly as I flipped through the first few pages. Complicated medical terms and messy, red-marked charts that I didn't understand filled the file. But one section caught my eye. It had my name. Caroline Parker. Preliminary assessment. Symptoms consistent with delusional disorder. My vision blurred. I didn't dare read further. My hands folded the file and put it back. Exactly as it was. I sank to the bedroom floor, tears streaming down my face. But I didn't dare make a sound. Suddenly, memories flashed through my mind. Thomas's distant stare. The nights he came home late, the mysterious calls, his words earlier. That's all you need to remember. I love you. I no longer knew what was true and what was a lie. The trip to New Orleans. Was it really just a getaway to heal? Or was it the start of something far worse than I could imagine? The trip began under the soft morning sunlight, but the atmosphere in the car was unusually heavy. Thomas drove, his eyes on the road, but unable to hide his tension. He kept glancing at the rearview mirror so much that I had to ask, is something wrong? Is someone following us? Thomas gave a strained laugh, not turning to look at me. It's nothing. I guess I'm just tired and a little on edge. Don't worry. But that laugh no longer reassured me. Throughout the drive, he took several calls, speaking so softly I could barely hear. His hands gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. I sat beside him in silence, listening to my racing heartbeat. Every passing minute only making my unease grow. Around midday, we stopped at an old gas station along the road, surrounded by the emptiness of Louisiana. A faded sign read Bayou Stop Gas, swinging in the breeze. Thomas turned off the engine and looked at me. Do you want to go in and get some water or something? I'll fill up the tank, then we'll head out again. I nodded and stepped out while Thomas went toward the pump. A young man with suntan skin in a worn blue uniform came over. His name tag read Yi. He started pumping gas, but subtly glanced at me through the window. When Thomas turned his back to check the rear of the car, the man came closer to the passenger side window, pretending to wipe it, then swiftly slipped a small piece of paper through the gap. I froze. Ethan said nothing, just shook his head slightly, his eyes serious, then walked off as if nothing had happened. I glanced at Thomas. He was bent over, checking the tires, unaware. My hands shaking, I opened the note under the cover of the dashboard. You need to get out of here. Right now. He's lying to you. Don't ask. Don't hesitate. I heard my heart thudding loud. A sound that echoed so hard, it felt suffocating. My whole body went cold. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. Thomas came back, his voice light as the breeze. Go on in and get something to drink. I'll finish up here and come join you. I clenched the piece of paper in my hand and walked quickly into the convenience store. My mind was in chaos. Who was Ethan? Why did he send me a message? Did he mistake me for someone else, or was I truly in danger? Inside the store, I pretended to pick out a few bottles of water, my eyes scanning for Ethan. At the end of the hallway leading to the back, he stood there, his look saying, "Follow me." I hesitated for a second, then decided to follow. Out back, next to a row of trash bins and an old generator, Ethan looked me straight in the eye, his voice low but clear. Sorry for scaring you, but I couldn't just stand by. 3 weeks ago, I saw your husband here. He was with a blonde woman. They were very close. I didn't plan to interfere, but then I overheard them talking. The ground seemed to tilt beneath me. My voice came out. What were they talking about? Ethan swallowed hard, glancing cautiously toward the front. He called her his real wife. When she asked, "What about her?" "Your husband said, 'Let this trip take care of it. Then everything will be ours.'" I heard it clearly. I couldn't believe it. But this morning he stopped for gas alone, called someone and said, "All the hospital admission paperwork is done. She won't have any more chances." Asterisk. I gripped the hem of my shirt to keep my hands from shaking. Ethan went on, his eyes earnest. "I don't know what they're planning, but it's definitely not good. Don't go back to the car. If you want, I'll take you to the nearest police station. They'll help you." Footsteps sounded from the front. Thomas's voice called out, sharper than usual. "Caroline, where are you?" Ethan lowered his voice, pleading. "You have to decide. Right now. If you go back, you won't get another chance." I took a deep breath, looking into those sincere eyes. All those years of love, all those memories, now felt like a shattered picture that couldn't be pieced back together. I nodded, my voice barely a whisper to myself. "Help me get out of here." Thomas's voice echoed from the front, no longer carrying any of the gentleness I used to know. I held my breath, my heart pounding as if it would burst. Every piece in my mind came together. The mysterious calls, the strange medical file, the calculated trip. It was no longer suspicion. It was the truth. I ran after Ethan, circling around the gas station's side exit. His old blue pickup was waiting. Ethan opened the door, urging softly, "Hurry. Don't look back." I climbed into the truck, hearing Thomas's footsteps pounding behind us. As the truck pulled away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Thomas was running out, his face flushed with fury and panic. There was no longer the look of a husband searching for his wife. Only the face of a man watching his plan fall apart. The old truck roared to life, kicking up dust as it left the gas station, leaving Thomas behind. I sat trembling beside Ethan. He glanced at me, his voice steadying. "The police station's only about 30 miles from here. Hang in there. You're safe now." I could only nod slightly, tears silently streaming down my face. When we reached the police station in the small town of Bayou Grove, a female officer named Kelly greeted me. I recounted everything, the warning note, the medical file, and Thomas's strange behavior. Kelly listened intently, then spoke gently. "At this point, we can't arrest him based on suspicion alone, but we'll file a report right away. I advise you to request an emergency protective order and consider hiring a lawyer or a private investigator to gather more evidence." Ethan took me to the home of a friend of his, an older woman named Doris who lived nearby. Doris welcomed me with a warm hug I hadn't expected from a stranger. That evening, I called Allison and told her everything. Allison immediately connected me with a private investigator she trusted, Nathan Brooks, a specialist in marital fraud cases. The next day, Nathan met me at a small cafe in Baton Rouge. He was a middle-aged man with sharp eyes but a calm voice. "I'll start by looking into Thomas Parker's background. I suspect there's something off about his identity and life." 3 days later, Nathan called me, his tone serious. "Caroline, I need to see you right away. I've uncovered the truth." At his small office, Nathan handed me a thick file. On top was a photo of Thomas standing next to a blonde woman and 2 twin children, about 8 years old, taken in front of a house in Jackson, Mississippi. He pointed at the picture. "Your husband's real name is Thomas Green. He's had another family in Jackson for the past 10 years. That woman is Amanda Green, his legal wife in Mississippi. The 2 children are his." I was stunned. 10 years. That meant when he and I were still newlyweds, he already had another family. Nathan continued, his voice grave. "They've been plotting to take over your assets. I obtained a warrant to access Thomas's call records. In the recordings, he spoke with a man named Samuel, a psychiatrist, about creating a fake file for you, preparing to have you committed under a false diagnosis to control your assets." He handed me Thomas's bank statements, payments made to Dr. Samuel with the note fee for file preparation. My hands trembled as I held those papers. Everything was clearer than ever. The man I had loved and trusted all these years was actually a fraud, using my trust to try and take everything. Nathan placed his hand gently on the table, his eyes full of resolve. Now's the time. You need a good lawyer. I can recommend someone. We'll work together to protect you and bring him to justice. I drew a deep breath, my heart aching but filled with a strange new determination. Even if the past had been built on lies, I wouldn't let him destroy the rest of my life. After the meeting with Nathan Brooks, I knew I couldn't delay even a single day. With all the strength I had left, I picked up the phone and called Allison, asking her to connect me with a strong enough lawyer to help me fight this tough legal battle. Without hesitation, Allison introduced me to Sarah Whitman, a well-known attorney in Baton Rouge who had won many cases involving marital fraud and asset theft. That very afternoon, I met Sarah at her office, a simple space that radiated determination through the thick case files piled on the desk. Sarah listened as I spoke, her eyes lighting up with resolve. Caroline, this file is enough to charge Thomas with bigamy and fraud. The first thing we need to do is immediately request an order to freeze all joint and individual accounts to prevent any transactions. With Sarah and Nathan's support, I quickly signed all the necessary papers. Just 2 days later, the court approved the order to freeze the accounts and real estate assets that Thomas had co-owned with me. At the same time, Sarah officially filed charges with the authorities in both Louisiana and Mississippi, the two places where Thomas had operated under his false identity. The storm began. Thomas surely never expected that I could act so quickly and decisively. 3 days later, police working across both states raided and arrested Thomas at a rental apartment near the Texas border, where he had been hiding after realizing his plans had collapsed. Amanda Green, his real wife, was also detained for investigation on charges of being an accomplice. I still clearly remember the moment I stepped into the courtroom for the first time. My heart pounded in my chest as I saw Thomas led in, handcuffed, looking nothing like the confident, polished man who once stood beside me. His face showed pure bitterness when he saw me sitting there, not the trusting, loving wife I once was, but the plaintiff, ready to stand up and demand justice. The case quickly drew attention from the local press. Reporters lined up outside the courthouse, flashbulbs popping as I appeared alongside Sarah. But I no longer felt afraid. The only thing on my mind was ending this nightmare once and for all. Throughout the trial, which lasted more than 3 months, the evidence Nathan and Sarah had gathered left Thomas with no way to deny his crimes. Recordings of his shady phone calls, bank statements showing bribes paid to the psychiatrist, the forged medical records about me, photos of Thomas with Amanda, and their marriage certificate from Jackson. Everything was presented in court. In the end, the verdict was delivered. Defendant Thomas Green is sentenced to 7 years in prison for bigamy and asset fraud. Amanda Green is sentenced to 3 years in prison as an accomplice. Hearing those words, I felt my whole body lighten. I gripped Sarah's hand tightly, tears falling silently, not from pain, but from knowing I had done the right thing. Thomas didn't look at me once as he was led away. Perhaps he understood that, in the end, liars can't win forever. I decided to sell the house that held so many false memories. With that money, and what assets I was able to preserve, I moved to a small coastal town near Mobile, Alabama. A peaceful place, far removed from all the painful memories. My new house was modest, but for the first time in years, I truly felt I belonged. In the early mornings, I sat on the porch sipping hot coffee, listening to the sound of waves crashing on the shore. The sunlight glistened on the sea like a reminder. From now on, I would start over, without fear, without confusion. In those first days in the coastal town of Mobile, Alabama, I lived quietly, spending time healing the wounds I had avoided facing for so long. Each morning, I sat on the porch, gazing out at the endless blue sea, listening to the waves and the cries of seagulls. One afternoon, wandering through the town center, I saw a flyer posted outside the library. Support group for victims of marital fraud and emotional abuse. Share and heal together. I don't know why, but I stood there for a long time. That night I couldn't sleep, thinking of women like me, those who might still be trapped in fear, unable to find a way out. The next morning, I went to the community center and signed up for the first time. Standing before a group of strangers, I told my story. My voice trembled as I spoke of betrayal, of the moment I had to choose between blind love and harsh truth. But the more I shared, the lighter I felt. The shining eyes of the women before me, their nods of understanding, their quiet tears, it all gave me strength. From a participant, I gradually became a supporter. Together with other members, I helped organize sharing sessions, guided victims to seek legal help, and most importantly, helped them rediscover their own worth. Every time someone said, "Because of you, I found the courage to leave that hell," my heart felt warm. Amid those days, I kept in touch with Ethan, the young man who had saved me that day. Ethan had moved to New Orleans to finish his mechanical engineering degree. We often texted and sometimes called. In every message from Ethan, there was a sincerity, a kindness I had never seen during all those years of a false marriage. One autumn afternoon, I received a message from Ethan. "Caroline, I just graduated. I got my first job at a manufacturing company nearby. My mom wants to invite you to dinner to thank you for trusting me that day. Can you come?" I read the message over and over, smiling without realizing it. The truth was, the ones who deserved thanks were Ethan and his mother, for they had pulled me from the abyss. That evening I drove to their home, a small house in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of New Orleans. Linda, Ethan's mother, welcomed me with a gentle smile and a warm hug. Dinner was simple but filled with laughter. We talked about the past, about the future ahead. Ethan excitedly spoke of his new job and his dream of building machines to help the community. Linda, with proud eyes, shared the struggles of raising a child alone and the regret of once watching a loved one be taken advantage of. I sat there listening, feeling a peace I hadn't known in so long. Among people who shared no blood ties, no common past, I felt what I had longed for all these years: genuine kindness, sincere hearts with no hidden agendas. As we said goodbye, Linda held my hand, her voice thick with emotion. "Caroline, thank you for not turning your back on my son that day. Because of you, he's grown so much." I gently squeezed her hand, speaking from the heart. It was Ethan who saved me. And because of that, I learned that real family isn't about blood. It's about those who treat you with all their heart. That night, on my way home, I stopped by the beach, opened the door to better hear the waves. The night sky sparkled with stars, and I knew my life had truly entered a new chapter. A chapter of freedom, strength, and gratitude for the kind souls who led me out of the darkness. Looking back on my journey, I understand that what seemed like the deepest pain was actually the beginning of a new, meaningful life. From a deceived wife, I found myself again, stronger, freer, and more appreciative of life's true values. I learned that family isn't necessarily those who share your blood, but those who come to you with sincerity and kindness. Now I live to spread hope, walking alongside those who, like me, once felt lost. What do you think of Caroline's story and her journey of rediscovery? Share your thoughts below and let us know how you feel. Don't forget to follow the channel for more inspiring stories about family and healing.